Since the time of the earliest tools and the mastery of fire, technological progress has been an integral part of being human. By utilizing technology, we have surpassed the most efficient and capable life forms on our planet. But in a world of ever-increasing complexity and finite resources, we are now presented with a whole new set of challenges. How will the next industrial revolution change the way we live? And quite possibly, what it means to be human. Throughout history, there have been periods of remarkable innovation. The first industrial revolution created new goods and new jobs through the introduction of manufacturing. The power of water, iron, and steam helped bring manufacturing out of our homes and into a larger world. Cities and opportunities grew. In the second, we forged better materials such as steel, harnessed the power of oil through internal combustion engines, and utilized electricity through generators and transmission lines. We catalyzed manufacturing and expanded what was possible. After the digital revolution, we possess computers so small they can fit in our pockets, and they're 1,000,000 times cheaper and 1,000,000 times more powerful than the best supercomputer only 25 years ago. Connecting through the internet has encouraged an incredible library of knowledge, setting the stage for the greatest revolution yet. So what is the fourth industrial revolution? Industry 4.0 involves a range of new technologies that are fusing the physical, digital, and biological worlds and impacting all disciplines, economies, and industries. Central to this revolution are emerging technology breakthroughs in areas such as robotics, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, nanotechnology, and 3D printing. These technologies can improve lives, create new jobs, make goods cheaper and better, and impact the world in ways we have yet to imagine. While it's remarkable to see the current trends, it's important to remember that technological progress is not simply guaranteed. It requires people to make it happen. This is your opportunity to get involved. This revolution does not happen without your help. Now is the time to be imagining. Now is the time to be creating. Now is the time to be a manufacturer. Visit newmexicomep.org to learn more and find out how you can start building our future today.
Good morning and welcome to all of our guests today. I'm Jennifer Sinzabaugh, the CEO for New Mexico Manufacturing Extension Partnership, or New Mexico MEP as we like to say. Our organization has the great pleasure of working with manufacturers throughout our state because our primary mission is to help grow manufacturing in New Mexico. On behalf of our organization, our team, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our annual Advanced Manufacturing Summit. And since our summit was held for the first time ever virtually this year, we were able to actually spread it across 3 days. We had a few speakers on Tuesday, a few speakers yesterday, and we have a few more for you today. If you weren't able to join us on the previous sessions, we covered manufacturing workforce, cyber hygiene practices, manufacturing economic trends, and supply chain resiliency. And if you missed those or are still looking for some highlights, over the next few weeks, we will post information and tips and tricks and things that we learned from this year's event on our website. To those that did join us on the previous day, we welcome you back as we engage on our grand finale today. This year, our summit was designed to address some of the major challenges that face the manufacturing industry, while also looking at the opportunities that our current economy and environment presents for manufacturing. Before I introduce our first speaker, I wanted to do a little bit of the technical details here. We are streaming through YouTube today, so we ask that you use the chat function to submit your questions, and we will try our hardest to get to as many as we can. If you haven't found that chat function yet, we ask you to please look for that live chat icon. Simply click or tap it, depending on your device, and it should pop up a chat window on the side of your screen where you should be able to type and submit any questions. And of course, while you're there, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. So as we jump into our first speaker today, we wanted to introduce our first speaker today, who's here to discuss sustainable manufacturing. So we welcome to our set here virtually Dr. Carl Hoppala, who is an associate professor and Tom and Carmen West Faculty Scholar in the School of Mechanical, Industrial, and Manufacturing Engineering at Oregon State University, where he conducts research in sustainable manufacturing assessment, life cycle engineering, and sustainable engineering education, and collaborates with universities, government labs, and industry. He serves as the co-director of the OSU Energy Efficiency Center and director of OSU's DOE Industrial Assessment Center, as well as the Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Innovation Institute Satellite Office located at OSU. He has authored more than 140 refereed proceedings and journal articles. He's received 4 Best Paper Awards and the SME Outstanding Young Manufacturing Engineer Award. He previously served as chair of the ASME Lifecycle Engineering Technical Committee and chair of the ASME Design for Manufacturing and Lifecycle Technical Committee. He received his PhD in Mechanical Engineering Mechanics from Michigan Technological University as an NSF Sustainable Futures IGERT trainee. Dr. Hoppala, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Thank you, I'm doing well.
Good, good. Well, we're so glad to have you here, and I'll let you go ahead and take over the show here.
Very good. Okay, I'll share my screen. Let me know if that's coming through okay. Okay, I think it's coming through. Thanks for the introduction. I guess from the introduction, we can take away that I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. But a lot of work, as was introduced, around this area of sustainable manufacturing, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. So I've given the title of my talk here as Sustainability in Manufacturing. So with the thought of how can we integrate sustainability and sustainability thinking into our manufacturing processes and manufacturing systems. So what I'd like to, let's see, did the slide advance? Okay. What I'd like to talk about, or what I hope we can get to today, is first of all to discuss what is sustainability thinking and what are drivers for sustainability in manufacturing, and then to more practically discuss what might be some opportunities that small and medium-sized manufacturers can be doing to pursue sustainability and within their practices. And I think this really can resonate with a lot of companies that are involved with the MEP, since that's kind of the focus of MEP activities also. And then lastly, I'll give a sort of a high level overview of what we're doing here in sustainable manufacturing research. I think there's a lot of details there that we could dive into, but may not be of direct interest to a lot of the audience. But if there's interest in learning more, definitely feel free to reach out, and I can have further conversations with anyone who might be interested, as well as hopefully there's some time at the end for some discussion around these topics. So if we think about sustainability thinking, we often hear these terms of lean thinking and systems thinking. And so along with sustainability thinking is, how do we approach what is sustainability and what does it mean to us, and how can it impact us from a business perspective? So there's a number of different concepts that have been put forward in how to think about sustainability and sustainable development, especially from an industrial perspective. So I thought I'd share some of those as a way to introduce the topic. So one conceptualization of sustainability is this 3 pillars model, where the economy, society, and environment are working simultaneously together to support sustainability efforts. And one example of how that has come across in the community is through this statement from the UN. So we reaffirm our commitment to achieve the goal of sustainable development. These efforts will also promote the integration of the three components of sustainable development: economic development, social development, and environmental protection. And here we kind of see this, where this conceptualization comes through as interdependent and mutually reinforcing pillars. So this is one way of viewing what is sustainability and how does it come into defining what objectives we might have as an organization or as a higher level society. Another way that this has been conceptualized has been through these three intersecting circles, where we see these same three primary pillars, as we might say, as society, economy, and the environment, and where all three intersect. Then we're thinking about things from a sustainability perspective. So sometimes this is this concept of focus in where all three are intersecting, and we have this balance among society, economy, and environmental perspectives that's sometimes called as strong sustainability. So here's a statement made by Robert Gibson that kind of realizes this conceptualization of this of sustainability. So the core argument here is that the integration, particularly of social, economic, and ecological considerations, is the essence of the concept of sustainability and must be a central consideration in the design and implementation of sustainability-based assessment. So there's a few things that come across here. Again, we see that how the social, economic, and ecological considerations all need to come together, both from a planning perspective, but here also Gibson is taking also a retrospective view, as we might be looking in the rear view mirror a bit at how do we assess where it is that we've been, for example. A third conceptualization is as three concentric circles. So again, we see the economy, society, and environment, but here economy and society are viewed as subsets of the overall environment. So this was kind of a view, for example, that Gaylord Nelson espoused when he talked about the economy being a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment and not the other way around, where all economic activity is dependent upon that environment and its underlying resource base of forests, water, air, soil, and materials. And then he went on to say, when the environment is finally forced to file for bankruptcy because of its resource base has been polluted, degraded, dissipated, and irretrievably compromised, the economy goes into bankruptcy with it. So this is a very stark view of how the economy could be a subset or here viewed as a subsidiary of the environment. So within all of these different conceptualizations, we see this importance that's placed on the integration and the simultaneous consideration of economic, societal, and environmental factors. So that presents a very big challenge for both assessing systems as well as doing future planning for what we should be doing, first of all, as a society, but then at an individual company level or even at the individual level, right? So it becomes a very value-based decision that has to take place when we try to balance economic objectives against societal and environmental objectives. So coming back more practically then to manufacturing, what does that mean? So there's a definition that I kind of like, or a statement that I like, that kind of describes how sustainability feeds into what we need to be doing as industry, what we need to be doing from an engineering perspective, where I come from. So thinking about it as the design of human and industrial systems that ensure humankind's use of, here we see, natural resources and cycles do not lead to diminished quality of life due either to losses in the future, economic opportunities, or adverse impacts on social conditions, human health, and the environment. So again, those three pillars come across. And the other thing that comes across in this statement is kind of at the middle of the statement where they talk about diminished quality of life, which is an interesting way of stating it, because how do we value quality of life? And that sort of question will vary from person to person, might vary from society to society, of what is a good quality of life and what is required to achieve a desirable quality of life. And that can also be time varying, as we might talk about in a little bit later, as we look at some of the current trends that we're seeing. So on the right side here of the slide, from an engineering perspective, then we can take a life cycle perspective of what it is that we're designing and manufacturing and sending out to customers. So a key element of this whole life cycle then becomes the design stage. How do we think about how something should be manufactured, and what should we be taking into consideration at that time about, what happens when it gets sent out to the customer? How do they use it? What do they do with that product when they're done with it? Does it go to the landfill, for example, or are there opportunities to recycle or maybe even remanufacture or refurbish a particular product that's being designed? So it then becomes incumbent upon designers to think about innovative ways of designing products such that they are easy to disassemble, for example, to be sent into remanufacturing or recycling streams where materials can be easily separated. And of course, many of the products we use today use materials that are difficult to recover, or materials that are put together, or parts that are put together in very complex ways, which makes it difficult to think about this end of life or to plan for end of life. So that's a big challenge that really faces industry today, is how do we think beyond even the four walls of our factory to what happens to the product after it leaves. And of course, there's been a big focus on the upstream supply chain also. Where are our materials coming from? What kind of materials are we using? So there's a lot of nuanced questions that can come into play here when we start to think about how do we integrate sustainability into manufacturing. So taking another step in a little bit different direction, back to this first idea of sustainability thinking. What is sustainability thinking? We've proposed what that might be. So thinking about trying to simultaneously consider environmental, economic, and social aspects across the whole life cycle of a product. But then we could say, well, what has really driven us as an industry to think about sustainability? So there's a number of drivers, of course. So most glaringly, I guess, are these sort of symptomatic drivers, I might say: energy, emissions, waste. So very visible use of non-renewable sources of energy, for example, emissions of pollutants and greenhouse gas emissions of concern. And then, of course, wastes. And wastes are for any lean organization, are always of concern. And there's many different types of wastes. But from an environmental perspective, most strictly is, these solid, liquid, and gaseous effluents But if we, if you're familiar with lean methodology, and so sometimes we hear about the integration of lean and green, there's many other forms of wastes that can occur within industry. So from a sustainability perspective, for example, if we think about the underutilized talent form of waste, if we're not providing workers with meaningful work, that can also be seen as a form of waste, but also a negative from a sustainability perspective. And then finally, business drivers. So we can talk about some of those also to define what those might be. But I thought next, what I'd like to do is dive down into some of these various drivers and just provide some interesting information that we can see from, first of all, from a national level in terms of how are these types of drivers impacting industry, and what might society and our customers in general be thinking about as they view industry. So industry has historically been dirty, dark, and dangerous. We hear the 3 Ds from that perspective. But how do we change that view to show manufacturing as being smart and sustainable and forward thinking? That becomes another challenge of industry to be able to do that. So as we think about energy, this is an interesting graph from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. And this data has not yet been updated. It's now available. I just didn't have a chance to update it on my slide here for the most recent information. Of course, many of these lines have dipped over the last year as a result of the pandemic, but we can see the general trends. So this is looking at primary sources of energy, basically energy that's coming from the ground or from the sun or biomass and those sorts of things. So we can see over time there's been this continual increase of energy consumption, and in the late 1970s there was really a realization that we need to be thinking of ways to reduce energy. And there was along with the period of growth over the 80s and 90s, there was still a strong increase in energy use relative to industrial productivity. But what's interesting, since about the year 2000, that's really flatlined. And then we've seen a couple of dips as a result of the Great Recession 10 years ago, but we've kind of almost leveled back up to that previous plateau. So it's we've become a lot more productive within the energy that we are using. So this realization in the 70s and continuous improvement efforts to drive down energy use and develop new technologies. So some things that have become really common today, such as variable frequency drives on motors and LED lighting, those all work to reduce this overall demand for energy. At the same time, the line just below the top line in purple is our total fossil fuel consumption. And we see that's actually continuously been on a downward decline. At the same time, however, we see the red line lower down, which is our natural gas consumption, which has gone up as we've found new sources of natural gas in the United States. And then a lot of the renewables and hydro and nuclear, they're really more minor contributors, but definitely growing and important. So this kind of graph shows from a high level view where is our energy coming from. Another way to look at this same information is who is actually consuming this energy. And the top consumer is actually the electrical power sector, as might make sense. So they're using these primary energy sources to convert into electricity that then gets provided to all of the other sectors. The various sectors of the economy, though, are using primary energy, with the top user being the transportation sector. So the transportation sector, of course, is very reliant on gasoline and diesel fuel to move vehicles. Although we're starting to see some shift towards electrification of vehicles, but that has not had an effect on the recent increasing trends we've seen in primary energy consumption by vehicles. Over the last year, however, this has dropped off dramatically as we've driven less with everyone staying home and working from home and so on. The second line down there then is industry, and we kind of see a similar continuous increase since the Great Recession in the energy being consumed by the industrial sector. So even though we've become a lot more efficient at how we use energy, overall we're having this sort of rebound effect, maybe you could say, where we're finding other ways to consume energy, and also growing the industrial sector, or the growing industrial sector is requiring more energy to sustain its growth. This graph shows kind of the same data here with integrating the electrical energy consumption into the various sectors. So when we look at it in this way, we see that the transportation sectors remains the transportation sector is still fairly significant, but the energy being used by the industrial sector is the most significant compared to the other sectors. The other interesting thing to see is where we saw the increasing trend from a primary energy demand perspective within industry. Overall, as we considered electrification, added into it, the effect is much less. So it's been still fairly level over the past 10 years or so in terms of total energy being consumed by the industrial sector. So here we could look at what sources of energy is the industrial sector using, but I won't belabor the point. A couple interesting trends is the sharp decline in the dependence on coal within industry, and then the recent reliance on natural gas. You can see. So we talked about energy. The other driver that I mentioned was emissions or pollutants. So here we could look at carbon footprint. So this graph is showing what are how much direct carbon emissions are coming from these different sectors of the economy. And what we notice is, as we might expect, from the consumption of fossil fuels in internal combustion engines, transportation has the highest carbon footprint compared to any of the other sectors of the economy. But when we consider the electrical energy use, or the indirect emissions, so the emissions coming from the generation of the electricity, we see that industry actually becomes the highest or has the highest carbon footprint compared to any other sectors of the economy. On transportation, we notice a very slight red line there as we've started to move towards electrification of vehicles. But all of this to say, industry needs to be thinking about how can we be more efficient about using direct energy as well as using electrical energy. Finally, then we could think about these waste trends. So over time, the most recent information I could find nicely was back from 2009, but I suspect if we were able to carry the data forward to today, it would be very similar. So we kind of peaked in municipal solid waste generation in the early 90s, and we've gotten a lot better about what we're actually throwing away into landfills with the increase of recycling and composting and other energy recovery. But I think if we look at the top line of how much waste is being generated and the general increase, although it's been decreasing, we can ask the question, where is this waste coming from? So if people are throwing waste into their garbage cans, that first probably came from some manufacturing facility, either packaging or products that wear out and fail and need to be thrown away. So we need to be, there's opportunities there for us within the industry sector again, and within manufacturing, to find ways to eliminate the waste that consumers need to be discarding as waste. So how do we close the loop on some of these materials and bring them back into the manufacturing? Becomes a question that we can consider from a design engineering perspective. We'll jump to the next slide here. So we see all of this, and simultaneously, and some of the trends that we see in terms of the increasing energy use within the industrial sector and other sectors of the economy are really driven by the continual growth in the US and around the world, and that's driving the needs for consumer goods. So we could ask the question then, or what might be the sources of these increasing needs? So most basically, as we need to meet the needs of individual people, we could say, well, how many people are in the world? And by all predictions, we're going to continue on the upward trend in terms of the population, at least for the next several decades, even by the most stark projections. So that's one thing that needs to be considered, is how are we meeting these needs, and what needs do these new people have? The second piece of this is, along with increasing population overall across the world, the ability of individuals to support their existence, or if we look at it in terms of GDP for individual countries, the overall affluence around the world is on a increase, although over the past 10 years we could say it's leveled off a bit, but still much higher than historically over the past 40, 50, 60 years. We can also look at how is affluence increasing around the world, and one comment we can make is affluence is increasing everywhere, but there's differences in how that increase is happening in different places around the world, with the greatest increase being in North America, and the lowest increases being in the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. So on one hand, there's this difference between different regions of the world, but overall we're seeing this increase everywhere, with people demanding more products to buy with their discretionary income. So we can put all of this into a very simplified equation where we say, okay, what does this really mean for impact on the environment or sustainability if we want to think more broadly? So we could say, increasing population, increasing affluence, increasing impact of technology per dollar of GDP are all going to drive impacts on the environment. And if we think back to the last 2 slides or 3 slides that I showed, we can say by 2040, population is predicted on average to increase by 1.2 times. We saw the increase in population projections. We also saw that the current increase in affluence in terms of GDP per capita, and that following that curve, we could say, by 2040, affluence will be 1.8 times what it is today worldwide. And without even considering the last multiplication factor in this equation, 1.2 times 1.8 says, if we think simply about it, the impact on the environment, the impact on sustainability is going to be double the impact of what we have today. Well, what is our opportunity? So our opportunity is the last part of the equation, which is what impact is the technology? What impact are the actions that we take within industry? How do we reduce that per dollar of product that we're producing and sending out to customers? So this is not new information, but it's another way to think about it and to really say what is it, if we believe population is going to increase by 1.2 times, if we believe affluence is going to increase by 1.8 times, then we need to be doing that much more with half of the resources, half of the impact that we have today. So some other drivers that from thinking more at a individual company level than for sustainability is really, as we become more sustainable, as we use less energy, as we use materials more efficiently, we can really drive down costs of operations. We also produce less waste and emissions, which from a waste perspective, we have to usually pay to get rid of our wastes, or there might be also fines involved if you're releasing hazardous substances, for example, or you have toxic releases. But the effect of using materials and energy more effectively is also this reduction in waste and emissions. The other on the other positive side is we can be more competitive relative to other companies operating in our same space by being able to advertise, let's say, or communicate our story of how we are operating more efficiently and being less impactful on the environment, which is something that consumers today are very aware of and interested in, and at least express a desire to buy products that are greener, let's say, or more sustainable or less socially impactful. Of course, bullet point 1 and bullet point 2 really need to work hand in hand, because if we're not able to reduce the costs of the goods that we're selling, we're not able to provide them to the customers at a competitive price. And while they say they want something that's greener, they may not be willing to pay more for it. Lastly, there's policies within the US and around the world that have come into place over the last 20, 30, 40 years that are also driving us to be more concerned about these direct, if I would say, symptoms of sustainability, which is using energy more efficiently, using materials more efficiently, reducing our wastes, reducing packaging, taking products back that can be taken back, for example. Okay, so transitioning then, what are we doing at Oregon State? And what I want to focus on here is, how are we really working with industry to help drive some of these sustainability impacts to be lower. So as was mentioned in the introduction, I'm co-director of the Energy Efficiency Center here at Oregon State University. And what the Energy Efficiency Center really does is it provides an opportunity to work with undergraduate and graduate students on projects focused on industrial energy efficiency and industrial sustainability. So we're working with industry, we're working with government agencies on projects that are tackling some of these issues, but also training the next generation to be able to go out and impact industry positively by providing them with tools that they can bring to their future careers to find ways to reduce energy and increase sustainability. So just by way of introduction, there's myself as the co-director. The other co-director of the center is Dr. Brian Frank, who's in our mechanical engineering program, and then recently retired the former director, Joe Junker. So we're Brian and I are taking over the center and carrying it into the future here, starting from this summer. And then within the center, our cornerstone program, I would say, and what works directly with industry is our Industrial Assessment Center program. And so that's led by Matt Thomas and Maritza Perez, who are our operations managers of the center. So I'll talk a little bit more about the IAC program, which may be also of interest to you, as these are scattered all around the United States. So here's the Industrial Assessment Center program funds these centers all around the United States. The program started way back in 1976, and it's been highly successful. So the main audience is small and medium-sized manufacturing companies that don't have staff on hand to be able to look into some of these types of issues and to work with them to identify opportunities to reduce energy use and improve productivity, and to direct them to resources such as the MEP programs that can further help them to realize some of the recommendations that we might make. So for New Mexico, you can see there's no center in New Mexico, unfortunately. So you'll have to lobby for that for the next 5-year cycle. But Arizona State University has worked with entities in New Mexico. And if you're interested to find, I'll explain a little bit more about the program, but you could reach out to them to see if they would be able to provide you an assessment of your operations. So in the Northwest, we've been around for over 30 years. We've done sites all over the Northwest. For this particular cycle, as you may have noticed on the map on the previous page, there's a new center up in Washington. So along with the California centers, we'll be mainly focusing on Oregon for the next cycle. As a time check, how much more time do I have? I want to make sure that I'm staying on the clock here.
Answer.
Hello, Dr. Hopla. Probably about, if we could wrap it up in the next 2 to 5 minutes, and then we could take a question or two, that'd be great.
Okay, very good. Thanks. So just to wrap up talking about the IAC, so these programs are student-run, faculty-supported. It involves a one-day site visit to evaluate all the systems. We visit a range of industries, so that can be very useful. There's a lot of experience there to bring to bear. And also looking at these systems and paying very personal attention to what particular facilities' goals might be. Recommendations span from energy management, waste minimization, pollution prevention, and productivity enhancements. There's the website there, iac.university. You can click on the links to find recommendation types, which can be very useful to get ideas of what kind of opportunities have been identified at other manufacturers and what you might also consider. Okay, so lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the Industrial Sustainability Lab, but maybe I'll wrap up here and see if there's any questions at this point.
Great, thank you so much. Perfect, and what great information. Let's see, we do have a question that has come in, which is, how significant will electric cars' impact be on the carbon footprint?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I guess, as I often say, is it depends. So, one thing we need to consider is what are the overall life cycle impacts of the vehicles and their production. But if we look at transportation in general, vehicles in general, the main impact over the product life cycle is during that use phase from typically the consumption of fossil fuels. From an electric vehicle perspective, where the energy comes from to support, to provide the energy to the vehicle is really what drives its carbon footprint. So if you're getting your energy from renewable sources such as hydroelectric power and or biomass or solar, that does a lot for your carbon footprint compared to places where energy is more reliant on fossil fuels, coal, for example. So that becomes a little bit of a nuanced question when you start to dive down into it. So making the vehicles as efficient as possible will help to drive that down further. I hope that answers the question. But
I believe so. I think that was a great answer. Thank you so much, Dr. Hopla. We have really appreciated learning more about this. I know it's such an important evolution in the manufacturing industry. We really appreciate you sharing with us today your insights on the topic.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And I welcome anyone to reach out if they have other questions or would like to learn more.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, well, we will continue on with our program here. Each day of the summit, we've been able to introduce New Mexico Manufacturing Company by sharing a video with you. And today's no different. We're going to bring you another video from a manufacturer that has actually been in New Mexico for over 33 years. The New Mexico MEP team has enjoyed working with this team over the past few years, and I will turn it over to the video to tell you a little bit more about their story today. I introduce you to Theta Plate.
My name is Aaron Velasquez.
I'm Jessica Velasquez, and we're here today at our third generation family business, Theta Plate, Inc. We specialize in high-tech and industrial electroplating services. We aim to make sure that anybody who walks through that door is going to have the highest quality, fastest turnaround electroplating anywhere in the country.
Electroplating is application of metals to other metals. We have jewelry, we have rework, sometimes it's grandma's tea set. We have electronics, and we've got high-tech, unknown stuff that's going on at the national labs. Working with MEP, our ability to solve customer problems has meant we have developed better customer relations. There's more trust towards us.
We are an organization that works with manufacturing companies. Our primary objective is just to grow manufacturing in the state of New Mexico.
Because we were able to streamline, we were able to do business better. We saw in just a few months the impact that that had on our bottom line. The temptation is to keep doing things the way they've always been done. Once we began our relationship with MEP, we were able to think more strategically about who we want to be in the world. It has transformed the way we think about ourselves and the way we think about our relationships with our clients.
During COVID, we were notified by some of our customers that we were to remain open.
We were designated as a critical business.
I would tie that directly back to my work with MEP in developing the systems to allow us to work for those particular customers.
That meant that we did not have to go through any staff cutbacks. We were able to keep this business functioning when things were so uncertain.
Thank you. What a great story. We sincerely thank Aaron and Jessica and their team for all the great work that they do at Fataplate and for being such a great representation for New Mexico manufacturing. Well, it's sad to say, but we're getting awfully close to closing out the fun and activities of the 2021 Manufacturing Month for New Mexico. But I'm very happy to introduce our final keynote speaker, who will no doubt energize us about the future of manufacturing. So here to join us today is Dr. Patrick Dixon. He comes to us as the chairman of Global Change Limited. He's the author of 16 books on global trends, including The Future of Almost Everything, and has been ranked as one of the 20 most influential business thinkers alive today, according to Thinkers 50. Dr. Dixon is a non-executive director of Mace Group Limited, a $2.4 billion per year global construction company, and has been group strategy director of a $3 billion turnover company. He often advises boards, governments, and senior leadership teams on global strategy, managing risks, and seizing new opportunities, and he's going to tell us how to do all that today. Welcome, Dr. Patrick. How are you?
Great, and it's been a great pleasure to be part of this important event, not just today, but also yesterday and Tuesday. Thank you.
Wonderful. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Well, I want to take us on a journey into the future. And you know what? I want to pick up on some of the important themes we've been hearing about over the last few days. And I don't know, it doesn't matter whether you're a chip manufacturer, whether you're in pharma, aerospace, whether you are electroplating, whatever it is that you do, I think there's really important and encouraging messages here for us today. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and I hope this is going to work. And let's go and see what we can see about the future. So I've entitled my session, Take Hold of the Future. Why? Because I'm a futurist. My job is to live in the year 2050 and to see tomorrow's history. And I work with around 400 of the largest 2,000 companies in the world, helping them to do just that. And many of them are global manufacturers. And I want to look beyond manufacturing 4.0, so-called, to 5.0 and far beyond that. You know, we heard a lot about COVID in the last few days in this particular event, and rightly so. And COVID is a hazard that I warned about several years before it happened. In fact, for over 10 to 15 years, I warned many of my largest clients about the risks from new viral pandemics. And we see new viruses emerge roughly once every 12 months somewhere in the world. So you didn't need to be that much of a prophet to see this one coming. But the big issue is this: what does it mean for manufacturing? And we heard yesterday about the tremendous challenges now in terms of catch up for manufacturers and supply chains and the rest because of so much money that was saved during lockdown, saved from experiences like going on holiday, vacation, or whatever, eating out. And that money has now been translated into buying products and services. And we're going to see that trend continue to drive extraordinary opportunity in New Mexico for manufacturers of all kinds, I would say, over the next 12 to 18 months and beyond. As I predicted, when COVID struck, people said, oh, you know, the world's come to an end. We will never be the same. There'll be major new trends. And I said, no, that's not correct. What we will see is acceleration of existing trends. I haven't seen a single new trend as a result of COVID anywhere in the world. I've simply seen a change in the timings of trends. You know, most debates about the future at boards that I attend for multinationals are not to do with what's going to happen, because ultimately that's usually fairly obvious to those who are specialists in their industry. It's more about timing. You know, by when will, let's say, the majority of new vehicles sold in New Mexico be electric powered? That's an important question. It's going to happen. The question is when. Now, the timing issues are really important for us, and the world is still turning. So, good news, despite the global crisis, tremendous opportunities in many sectors. But the greatest risk actually for any manufacturer, indeed for the leader of any country, is two words. It's institutional blindness. It's really easy to misread the signs, even when they are staring us in the face. Let me give you a couple of examples just from the world of hospitality. I mean, we've all had the experience, I'm sure, I certainly have many a time of this happening. You know, you go into a restaurant and you just want a meal, and you're having a fantastic dinner, the meal's great, the food's wonderful, the wine is great, but you just can't catch the waiter's attention. I'm sure, you know, every time I give that as an example, in a live theater, I see the audience ripple with laughter and they put up their hands and say, yes, that's me. I've tried to catch the waiter's attention. But the trouble is, it costs nothing to train a waiter to actually use their eyes. You know, why is it that most waiters spend most of their time looking for insects on the floor, it seems, as they walk around carrying their plates? They could so easily just look around the room, drink, bill, sweet. It's not difficult. And you can read maybe 24 tables at the speed of light in seconds. And when you teach a waiter that trick, you find a Michelin star restaurant can go overnight from loss making into profit. You find the waiters' tips have doubled in a single evening. You find that the whole atmosphere and morale has gone up. You find the social media posts go up. You find the business deals have gone up. Why? Because most business deals happen over the coffee, the sweet, and an extra glass of wine or beer. These are really important things for us to understand. And it's very important. It doesn't just stay in our heads, because it takes seconds and costs nothing to teach the waiter to do that. And I believe in every single manufacturer in New Mexico, in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in China, it's the same. There are tiny things that can create magic for the future, magic that takes us far beyond Industry 4.0 and creates the next product. I'll give you another small example, again from hotels. I travel a lot, and the other day I walked into a hotel. I had a good night's sleep. I got up, stumbled into the shower, and an accident happened. By accident, I had a shower in hair conditioner instead of shampoo. How on earth could something like that happen? I'll tell you why. Because the text on the bottle is so small, I need my reading glasses, but I don't carry my reading glasses into the shower. I had 800 executives, CEOs of the leading hotels in the world in Qatar a while back, and I asked them the question. I said, put up your hands if in your own hotel, by accident, you have grabbed the wrong bottle in the shower early in the morning and had a shower in wax or hair conditioner. And 40% of them put up their hands. How could this be? It costs nothing to print the label with a bit more larger type. It costs nothing to teach the waiter to open their eyes. It costs nothing to create magic in manufacturing if we just open our eyes. So let me just go back to this presentation for a moment. Let's see what this means when we open our eyes to understand the world that perhaps we're missing. So wherever we are in manufacturing, wherever we are, whatever industry we're in, yes, of course, everything's getting joined up more. Of course, we talk about the Internet of Things and big data, and all of these things are transformational to one degree or another. But it's not enough. You can be absolutely integrated with all of your data, and stuff still hits you. And we've seen that with COVID. Stuff happens. Geopolitical risks happen. Trade deals get cancelled. The lesson is this, that the world can change faster than you can hold a board meeting. So Industry 4.0 is not enough. We need to be looking further at what it means to be agile, resilient, and sustainable. You can have robots right through your factory. You can have every system you can imagine, perfectly optimized, lean and efficient, and suddenly something happens. See, robots can't innovate. They just can't do it. Here is an example of change. There was a 20-second event in Japan, an earthquake. It caused another 20-second event, a crack in a nuclear reactor. As a result, 40 years of energy policy changed in Japan because Japan cancelled nuclear. At the same moment, Germany was starting to react, and within several weeks, the country of Germany had also cancelled nuclear. They made a massive decision to close every nuclear reactor as fast as they could. In the same month, China announced the biggest nuclear spending boom they've ever had. The same happened in my country, in the UK. So think about it. We had a single event, two massively different emotional reactions to it, driving very different trajectories as a response to the same situation. What we learn from this is that when it comes to things like the future of energy, the future of sustainability, I'm going to talk more about that in a moment, the future of waste control, the future of regulation, the future of whatever it is, there's one word that will dominate the future more than innovation, more than mechanization, more than digital, more than the Internet of Things, more than big data. This single word has driven all of human history and will dominate the next 2,000 years, and it's emotion. It's emotional reactions to events that drive change in history. And emotion is really important in manufacturing, even in supply chains, even between manufacturers. Yes, of course, we see it in share prices and commodity prices and speculation, but I'm talking about more than that. You see, a link to emotion is this word we just heard about, which on that video, which is trust. In fact, I would suggest that for many manufacturers, trust is the biggest thing that we sell. It's the ability to deliver what our client needs. It might be the retailer, but more likely it could be a satellite manufacturer. But we have the chips that they require. Without those chips, the entire production is paralyzed. So the greatest risk for many manufacturers in the future will actually not necessarily be a disruptive event or something like that. It's reputation. It's letting the customer down, or it's losing that trust. And trust is extremely important for the future, even more than it has been in the past, because of the fear that people have had with multiple uncertainties, multiple events coming crashing into strategy. And it's not just things like the post-COVID boom. Now, I've been predicting for 15 years now that supply chains will grow shorter again, that we would see regionalization of supply chains, a lot more south to south trade, north to north trade. And indeed, of course, it's happening. And it's to do with risk. It's to do with reducing complexity. The days of having a global supply chain to build motor vehicles is finished. It's history. You just can't do it. In future, we're talking about a lot more, let's say, components being assembled in Mexico, with other parts produced maybe in New Mexico, going across the border to Mexico, being assembled, and then going back across and being sold as a vehicle, maybe an e-vehicle in the United States. We heard yesterday, I think it was, 67% of all sourcing managers across the United States are considering reshoring suppliers. Well, hey, surprise, surprise, what did I say? You know, it's an obvious no-brainer. We have to do it. And here's an example in Europe. I was in Belarus before the terrible troubles that they have just seen, which it's just another geopolitical risk, by the way. You know, I was pointed to a factory which was built by the Chinese, where they are producing Chinese vehicles for the Russian market, because Belarus is in a free trade area with Russia. And so it was a way of getting around sanctions and goodness knows what else. But the interesting thing is that 50% of every piece of metal, glass, plastic, whatever, inside these vehicles has come from Minsk itself, from the small factories in and around Minsk in Belarus. So these are Chinese cars built with lots of local content for a local market. We'll see far more of that in future. Now, as I say, whatever we're in, whatever kind of manufacturing process you have in your own life, what I'd say is this. If you want to know the future, so people often say to me, so what's the future of my factory? What's the future of this particular process? And what I'd say is, can I start with you? Because actually, in my experience, the changes that we are being confronted by in our personal lives to do with digital tools, mobile and the rest, are being followed by changes in corporate life, manufacturing, services, and the rest. So let's go on a journey here, and you'll see what I mean. So the first thing is to do with the perception of time. The web has made us incredibly impatient as individuals. In the United States at the moment, according to Google and many others who are watching online behavior, it takes only 5 seconds on your website to lose 90% of your business. Let me say that again. 5 seconds to lose up to 90% of your sales. You see, how can that be, Patrick? I'll tell you why. You see, we had the session, I think it was on Tuesday, about getting the website sorted, and you must, but it's more than that. It's to do with speed, the speed at which people find the right things. It's not just a question of having your search terms right. If you know, most of your customers come into your site on a mobile device these days, and the average time for someone to type in something like Britney Spears' birth date or something like that, or let's say a spare part from a piece of machinery, the average time that people will spend for a web page to load before they lose the will to live is about, well, it's about 3.5 seconds. Okay. So in 3 seconds, I do this with a show of hands many times in big events. I did it in Vilnius just last week. I had 800 marketing executives. I asked them a simple question: how long does it take you to press the back button on a browser? And 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. 70% of them have said goodbye. They're already irritated. After 4 seconds, 80% have lost the will to live. And after 5 seconds, 90% of them have terminated the business relationship, where they will never go back to that website. They're back to Google search. They've gone somewhere else. So every second really matters. Why am I saying this? It's not just the website. This is about the whole of life. It's a 5-second test. 5 seconds to answer the phone. 5 seconds to answer an email. What? To answer an email? Come on, Patrick. Okay, 5 seconds to answer the WhatsApp message. You say, well, I can't live like that. Actually, I'm just saying, in our private lives, we already are. In the private lives of your clients, they already are. It's just that in manufacturing, we kind of think we're in a different kind of bubble, but we're not. So suppose my wife and I are frustrated because our electricity company has overcharged us yet again. So what do? We pick up the phone and we get through to some stupid message, a pre-recorded message, which takes 60 seconds. And then we have to press buttons. Press 1 for accounts, press 2 for customer services. I know that most of you, like me, get really cross about that. You want to kill the people who put the systems in, because it is so irritating, right? Because it wastes more than 5 seconds. More than 5 seconds, that's like a million years. So pressing buttons is really annoying. I'm just saying, every second counts. The speed at which the phone is answered, the speed at which you're put through, the speed at which the web processing engine accepts the payment and confirms that the deal has been done. It's why WhatsApp is so important as a medium for the future in doing the deals. I often say to people, what kind of relationship do you have with your clients? And they say, well, what do you mean? I say, okay, well, you're either family or business. And they still don't get it. I said, listen, if you want to do a deal with someone in the Middle East and you're a New Mexico manufacturer, forget it unless you're in a WhatsApp relationship. Why? Because email is just about business, and who bothers with email these days? It's the WhatsApp. In the WhatsApp, and the client shows you, the photograph of their 1-year-old child's birthday party yesterday. On the WhatsApp, they're showing their score on the golf course. On WhatsApp, they're sending you a video greeting because they're in a bar with another colleague who you knew and you met last time you were in Dubai. WhatsApp is if you're in a WhatsApp relationship in many parts of the world, you're part of the family. And it's all about, what is that biggest word I've said that drives the future? It's emotion. And what's linked to emotion? Trust. And what's trust about? It's about relationship. It's about belonging. It's about looking the person in the eye and believing that person is really going to deliver on their promise. So I'm just saying there are simple things that we can learn from our personal lives, which are the secrets to creating magic in our manufacturing lives. And the wonderful thing is that most of these things cost virtually nothing. Okay, they're part of the digital world, and they're part of, I would call 5.0. It's humanizing what we've just been investing in, say, all this lean automated stuff, but it's putting a human element onto it. Again, in our personal lives, we expect a product to arrive within 24 hours or less with Amazon. And that's what people are wanting now from you as a manufacturer, which is another reason for reshoring. You can't order a product from China that's going to be delivered 9 a.m. tomorrow. Suppose something goes wrong with one of your important pieces of manufacturing equipment. You want someone on a video call within 20 minutes who can look at the problem on the video call, make a diagnosis, and within 6 hours, the spare part has arrived and you can just plug it in and go. We're thinking now, many of us on this call are already experiencing 1-hour delivery times for, let's say, groceries or some particular product from Apple or something like that. We're expecting to track that product, to be able to drive home and to be able to see the intersection between our vehicle and the delivery van and screech to a halt outside our house at the exact moment. Oh, hi. And we can see these people travel around. That's what we expect in our private lives. That's the future of manufacturing in our public lives. There is nothing less that we will settle for. This is what our normal is. As I say, some of it's expensive to do. A lot of it really is not. Okay, again, on virtual working. Yes, we've made huge jumps in this area, which has made us hyper efficient in some ways, but also there's an issue. We've learned in our personal lives that actually seeing family is really important. I'm actually doing this video call from a house which we rented on Airbnb for the last week, so that 18 members of our family could celebrate a little bit of normal life after COVID. Because actually video calls, they don't do it for us. They're fine, but it's not the same as breathing the same air. Now listen, if that's true in family, and family is all about emotion and trust, then my goodness me, it has to be even more true when it's talking about our most important relationships. I would say this, in the next 6 months, those that meet will thrive and those that don't will just survive. It's as simple as that. And whatever the restrictions are on travel to other countries, if that's where your important deals are, we're going to have to get on the plane and go. It's almost impossible to deliver a deal with a new client that you've never met before without eating food and if you're in Russia drinking the vodka or whatever, or in China drinking the rice vodka or whatever it is. It's just important, building relationships. It's humanizing all this wonderful stuff that we've been doing for so long, because innovation does not happen by pressing the button. It really doesn't. Even Apple's discovered that. They basically have summoned people back into the workplace. They said, we've discovered that we can manage amazingly well during lockdown, but we can't think, we can't innovate, and we can't change. That's pretty fundamental. We need to meet. So this is part of the future. It's going to be really important over the next 6 to 18 months. Now, another part of our personal lives that is a lesson for the future of manufacturing is, of course, mobile. And we've talked about that endlessly, of course, in these kind of events each year. But this is going up another level altogether. So I know that 80% at least who are on this call right now are already using mobile devices to monitor your heart rate, your blood pressure, your fitness, how far you walked yesterday. Many of you are doing it through iWatches or whatever the product is. It doesn't matter, Fitbit, but this is part of your normal life, that you have a stream of consciousness that enters you about everything. And we're talking about a 250 million wearable devices by 2023, a 70 billion market. And what does that mean for manufacturing? It means everything. It means that mobile is everything. It means that everything will be on an app. Everything. It means your clients want to see their products on the app. They want to be able to see the products being developed and manufactured. And why shouldn't they? It costs nothing to do. It's almost nothing to do. Cameras cost almost nothing. The apps are there. The Wi-Fi is there. It's just a question of installing this stuff. And straight away, we're involving humanity. We are creating an emotional connection between our client and what's going on inside your factory. Now, despite all of this, many trends are changing more slowly than people think. And I often think about, 20 years old, 20 years ago, maybe a guy, he was hit by a car and he's been unconscious for the last 20 years in intensive care, and then comes around and he asks for you by name and says, "Oh, hi, I've been asleep for 20 years. I've lost 20 years. What have I missed?" And I wonder how long you think it would take to bring him up to date. By the time you talked about, I don't know, a Gulf War, and he'd say, "Oh, another one." And you say, "Well, we've had a president or two." Yeah, we always do. And we had a few wobbles on the stock market. And we had, oh yes, you've probably had an economic crash. But how long would it really take for you to update him on all the changes in manufacturing in the last 20 years? My guess is not as long as you might think. Bank branches are basically still here. We thought they would have been gone by now. Music sounds much the same. My children are still listening to the Rolling Stones or Elton John or all kinds of people. Fashions, it's very difficult to tell from a photograph at a conference these days what the date of that conference was. Oh, that was the 2005 event, because people were wearing different things. Fashions, men and women, have stayed remarkably the same globally. Food is the same in the supermarkets. Trucks look the same. Containers are certainly the same. Planes are almost identical. Hotels, experience, homes, furniture is very similar. So we can easily get swept away and think, oh, the whole world's changing. And it isn't. And there's a parallel in manufacturing as well. I'm not going to overhype change in manufacturing. There's a lot of manufacturing that will remain relatively the same. The electroplating we just heard about, the process of electroplating has been known about for over 100 years. That physics, the chemistry behind, the electrolysis behind electroplating will remain the same. The mechanism of doing it, or the machines of dipping and all the rest of it, and monitoring it and quality control will of course change, but not maybe as dramatically as in some other sectors. Again, here's another example where we need a reality check. If I was to ask for a show of hands on this video call to find out how many people have a 3D TV at home, the answer would be effectively zero. And if there is, it would need to be put in a museum. Why? You can't buy a 3D TV anymore. Why? Because actually, the most important word of the future is emotion, and there is no real emotional connection. So there is not a single TV manufacturer anywhere in the world today that will deliver to you a 3D TV. It's finished, toast. So it's easy to get swept along with, oh yes, every factory is going to have this. It's not. We need to be very careful before we overdo it on some of the predictions here. Here's another one in people's homes. Yes, Facebook are announcing even more investment into augmented reality and predicting we'll all wear augmented reality headsets and have virtual lives. Well, maybe yes, but maybe no. I suspect that most people won't. Most people on this call, I suspect, are not particularly interested in wearing one of these kinds of things for a day or even an hour, unless they're playing computer games. And as for printing things in your home, you know what? I've had a 3D printer for over a decade now, and I'm bored with printing toys. I want to print parts for people now. That's another story, because I'm a physician in my first training. And the truth is about robotics. You know, most robots in the world are working in only one sector, which is car manufacturing, which has been the case for the last 20 years. And from around 2000 right through to 2015 or so, the number of robots in factories globally was increasing by only about 10%, 12% a year. Tiny compared to the Internet of Things, big data, the cloud, all of that, tiny. So let's be careful that we focus on what really matters for your particular factory, wherever you are, rather than getting swept away by some dazzling idea about something that's going to change the whole of everything, when it probably isn't. Now, here is a technology which really is here. It's working well, it's mature, it's very exciting, and will continue to mature. And that is the ability to visualize physical objects in front of other physical objects using a virtual device. Fascinating. The ability to design an entire factory process using virtual screens without having to build a single thing. Amazing. Very, very exciting. And we're seeing a lot of this kind of technology in construction of factories now. But again, you may not be the largest company in New Mexico. And it's true, as we heard, that 84% of all exports from this state are coming from small companies. So we need a reality check and think about the things which will really make a difference in your own company that have a fantastic payback. And yes, I would say prototyping is something that works very well, even for the smallest companies. The ability to try things out, the ability to render a particular product in a sophisticated machine. You don't even need to own the machine. You can design it, send it to a 3D production unit, and within a couple of hours, it'll be back with you. The ability to, for dentists, for instance, to be able to take a cast and in a small factory, maybe less than 20 miles away, to have beautifully created, perfect replacement teeth, which could be back in the client's mouth by later on that day. Astonishing, wonderful, life-changing. But it's also true that while we have this 85% of manufacturers being relatively small in New Mexico, there is this irresistible force to go for scale. And the reason is this, that the world is too small now for more than 5 large auto companies globally, more than 2 airline manufacturers, maybe 3, more than 2 mobile phone operating systems. There just aren't enough people on the earth to make it worthwhile. And even the 2 mobile operating systems we have are both hackable. So there's a lot of effort to keep these things running. Same with computer operating systems. The world is too small for more than 10 large pharma companies. We've seen this with COVID. You have thousands and thousands of small companies doing the innovation, and then they go to scale through large pharma. And that's how we've tackled vaccines. And of course, when you're thinking about multi-product assembly lines where you can shoot down 4 or 5 different sizes of books or 4 or 5 different models of cars all on the same line, this requires heroic investment. But the good news is this: if you are one of those smaller companies in New Mexico, there is going to be a boom in demand for niche manufacturers who are providing specialist support for the largest customers with total commitment to customization. And the key there is a lesson we can learn from Hollywood. It's, assembling a huge team to build a fantastic movie, which comprises maybe of 50 or 60 or 70 companies, all of whom are put together at the speed of light. They're welded together into one group with shared data, shared systems, common purpose, common vision, and they become a virtual film giant. And we're going to hear a lot more about virtual factories. I don't mean producing virtual parts. I mean, in the olden days, the company would have had all their supply chains organized. They would have owned this and owned that and the other. Now, and then of course they fragmented it and it became quite difficult to control. These companies are going to want to share data with you. They want to see inside your factory. They want to be able to watch physically, or certainly on monitoring, every single component coming out. They can see the products being loaded onto the pallets. They can see them as if they were part of their own factory on their own site. The fact that you're 50 miles or 500 miles away doesn't matter. The fact that you don't share any equity or any governance doesn't matter. You're part of the same organism. This is the next step on from just the Internet of Things, big data and things. It's stitching it all together. And the other thing I'd say is this: while we heard a lot about big data, the truth is, as I've always said, the real money is in the little data. That's where the value is. And it's the small fragments of data which create the greatest value for your clients, your customers, and for you too. Especially when it comes to things like predicting failure, automatic repairs. Infosys is a client of mine. They've managed to put sensors on oil rigs, for instance, and they can now predict fairly accurately which oil rig is going to blow up and what part of it is. They don't necessarily know why, but they know what part of it will, just by data association, analysis, and recognizing patterns, the machine recognizing patterns. All of this, there's a risk. And I'm so pleased we had a whole session on cybersecurity. And I don't want to rehearse all of that, except to say, whatever you think your commitment should be to cybersecurity, increase it by 50%. Because in my experience, most companies who are attacked think they've got robust systems and they've taken all kinds of protections, but they've still got hit. Because there are still flaws in their thinking. Remember what I said about institutional blindness. It's a bit like, getting the meal right in the kitchen, but still not training the waiter to use their eyes. It's easy to be vulnerable here. So take very carefully every lesson. If you miss that side position, I would suggest you go back and look at it carefully. And the most important thing of all is to say this: if you had a ransomware attack tomorrow, if you were locked out of every single desktop and portable device that you own, and held to ransom, what would you do to recover? How would you do that? That is your greatest defense of all, because once you've done that, you can sleep at night. Of course, you want to prevent the attack, but you must have a contingency in place. Now, I'll come back to the acceleration of trends. And with this, I'm steering my way towards the end. Acceleration, yes, of course, in every area, in many, many areas. Well, one big accelerated trend is our concern about the environment. And look, I don't want to get into a quarrel here about whether you think global warming is happening or not, or whether it's serious or whether it's man-made. I just say this: the future is driven by one word: emotion. And it's what people feel. It's not necessarily what the facts are. It's what people feel about them that matters. And that, from the point of view of your manufacturing strategy will be dominated by regulation, government changes, consumer pressure, and the pressures from other companies buying your products all the way up their supply chain. And I'm telling you this, that the passion about environment, plastics in oceans, global warming is going to increase dramatically, I believe, over the next 5 years. COVID has produced a step change in the mood music across the world on this issue. Here are 10,000 16 to 25-year-olds, 10 nations. 56% of them, that's 6 out of 10, say humanity is doomed, okay? Hear that, please. It's not just rhetoric. They believe that humanity is doomed. 6 out of 10 say governments have betrayed them and future generations. They're worried about climate. They're really, really worried. And they may be confused about whether the science is actually right or not, but they're worried that it might be. And they're worried that if it is, that there doesn't seem to be any fallback option, no plan B. They're worried about irreversible change, the prospect of that. They're not, even those who might think, well, it's only a 10% possibility. They're worried enough to lie awake at night, worrying about 10% possibilities. Our home is insured against fire. The risk of our home burning to the ground is, I hope, 1 in 10,000 or less, but we're worried enough to have insurance against it. This generation that I'm talking about are worried that we have no insurance against a threat which they believe is not a 1% or 0.01%. It could be a 10% threat. It could be much higher. And they're talking the language of stealing from the future. Now, again, you could say, oh, okay, it's all very dramatic. And only listen, it's coming. I'm predicting these things. I've had a very good track record over the last 25 years of reading these kinds of changes. And my question is this: what would it take for the world to actually declare war in the way that it declared war on COVID? And we are in a global emergency at the moment regarding COVID. We've had unprecedented deprivation of personal freedoms, unprecedented public spending by governments that are low spending by their sort of politics, but they have been forced into wartime responses in order to fight this. And we're right in the middle of it globally. 3 billion people still not infected or without a vaccine. What would it take for a similar scale of global urgency for CO2? Could it ever happen? The answer is, I think it could. I'm not saying it will. I think it could. And I think that with every year that we continue to delay responses at things like COP26, it makes it much more likely. And what would it mean to declare war? Well, in the First World War, the cost to the United States was equal to 52% of GDP. So what kind of things might cause a pivotal moment? Well, here is one. It's methane, frozen methane. Already there are areas of Siberia. By the way, Russia is, I think, 70% frozen most of the year. There are areas of Siberia where you can take a walking stick, hit the ground or stamp the ground, take a cigarette lighter and drop it, and that will catch fire because it releases gas, frozen methane, that has been frozen for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, suddenly bubbling up. And what does it mean? Well, it means all kinds of things. So last year, there was a methane explosion, just one. It produced a 50-meter deep crater. It just spontaneously combusted. You can see the earth behind is not frozen, it's defrosted. We have more carbon, more fossil carbon in frozen methane than in all the global coal, oil, and gas reserves globally. So this matters, my friend. And methane per molecule is 80 times more capable of retaining the Earth's heat than carbon dioxide. These are zombie fires. This is a map of a tiny part of Siberia where there are zombie fires. What are they? They're fires which have burnt up, like I've explained during the summer. You can see that's all thawed out there on that photo, but you can't put them out because when the snow and the ice come, it smolders underground, maybe 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, 10 meters, 15 meters down. It's smoldering away, impossible to put out. Does it matter? Yes, it might. It might. And by the way, that is a trend which is very difficult to reverse. We're already seeing large areas of Siberia that are thawing in the summer and are smoldering away in winter. Here's another example. We know that if I was to put you as a doctor, I'm a physician in my first life. If I put you into a room at 35 degrees centigrade and I raise the humidity to 100 degrees, you will be dead in 6 hours. It's just not possible to survive. Why? Because you can't sweat, you don't evaporate, you don't lose heat. But we're already seeing in different parts of the world regularly over 30 degrees at 100% humidity. And in some parts, for instance, in the Persian Gulf, we've certainly seen 1 to 2 or 3 hour periods when we've hit 35 degrees at 100% humidity. So what would it take if perhaps we had, say, half of a very populated area like Kolkata or Mumbai that came to, let's say, 35 degrees centigrade at 100% humidity for, let's say, 4 hours or 5 hours? The answer is you could see 2 or 3 or more million deaths, men, women, children of all ages dead in one of the greatest environmental catastrophes our world has ever known. Could that happen? Yes, it just might. I'm just saying that, in my view, over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, we could well see pivotal events that shift the whole conversation. But in the meantime, the governments are being left behind by companies. Manufacturers are being forced to take the lead and want to take the lead. So you're seeing manufacturers of cars have already decided to get out of diesel, petrol. They just don't want that future. And they're being helped by governments, but actually the drive is coming from the industry itself. And in many, many other manufacturing segments, I'm seeing The manufacturers are a year or two ahead of where the regulation is expected to be. And this generation, the generation that's worried about doom and gloom and the rest, this is the generation that are prepared to spend their $8,000, $10,000 more for an electric car. This is the generation that are talking about not lower carbon, not saving energy, but zero carbon supply chains. And zero carbon is a big word you're going to hear more and more. China has committed now, whether you might not believe them, but they have committed to being zero emissions, zero net emissions by 2060. That's a breathtaking stance by a country that is an emerging country in its earliest stages still of a global industrial revolution. The UK just decided to do 2050. Many countries, in fact, I would predict that over half the nations of the world will set a date by which they think their entire economy will be zero carbon. I said the debates about the future are not usually about what's going to happen. It's about timing. It's simply a question, by when will more than half the nations of the world have committed to a zero carbon emissions economy? That's in balance. It doesn't mean to say they don't emit. It means that somehow they've saved elsewhere, or they've sequestered carbon or something like that. Does that matter? Yes, it does, because what it means is that every manufacturer will be expected to play their natural part in this story. And here's a couple of examples, easy to do. And you're going to see 100,000 innovations, small and large, across the United States in manufacturing in the search to lower carbon use. Here's just one. British Sugar, they decided to buy a gas turbine. That sounds a little last century already for me to even say, get the word gas turbine, but they did. They bought a gas turbine to make the electricity. They used the heat from the gas turbine to cook the sugar. And then they decided to collect the carbon dioxide and the water vapor and channel it through a huge pipe and drive it into one of Europe's largest greenhouses. So these greenhouses are being filled with warm CO2 with lots of water vapor. And the result was that where they might have had, say, a harvest of 35 tons in a particular area of tomatoes in one section, they're now getting 70 tons, double. And in fact, most people in my country and other parts of Europe have probably eaten tomatoes built from carbon dioxide that has come from a gas turbine used to generate heat for manufacturing and electrical power. It's a nice story. It's a very tiny part of a big picture. Here is another one, very, very relevant right now. And with this, I'm at the end. It's about trucking. Now, there's nothing more relevant at the moment with a global shortage of containers, a shortage of truck drivers across the United States and across Europe. But here's the scandal. 28% of all trucks driving around right now, this very second, across the United States of America are carrying nothing but air. That's 50 billion wasted miles a single year. Now, if we could reduce that to just 20%, and it would be easy to do, we could solve a massive problem in terms of reducing carbon emissions. So I'm just saying, by the way, how would you do it? You just have a one website that works a bit like eBay or Amazon or Airbnb, and it's simply renting space and it's mixing and matching. You just say what product you got, and suddenly a computer is saying, well, that I know that lorry belongs to Walmart, but basically it gets hijacked on the return journey and they pick up stuff, and Walmart makes some money from doing it. It's a kind of software that I know an 18-year-old boy or girl could do in their shed at the bottom of their parking lot. It's not difficult to do. Someone's going to do it. I'm just saying it's just an example of huge numbers of things that we can do to build the future. So therefore, what's the future? Well, it's about agile strategy. It's about building trust. It's about committing to mobile data like we've never done it before, following the kind of things that we take for granted in our personal lives. It's about smart customization for much larger manufacturers if you're small, and about making it greener. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. What a great, energizing talk. You know, I think that really encapsulates where manufacturers are and everything that's being thrown at them and dealing with. You know, I took from that the emotional piece. We can't lose sight of that emotional piece, or we're going to lose sight of our successes, right? And so, you know, the other highlight I had was let's take this and do something different today than we did yesterday, and continue accelerating the momentum, like you said, towards these trends.
Questions already.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions already, if we have time to
Oh,
deal with
yes,
them.
absolutely. We will get to those. We can get to those right now. Let's see. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So for our first question, as far as speed, Freightliner projects an 18-month wait time for a new truck. Do you think that drivers and trucking companies will look towards alternatives? And if so, what do you think they will be?
Well, the whole world is going to go mad doing this, right down to every single Uber driver in New York, right? Honestly. Fabulous moment. If you own a car or a pickup truck, this is your moment. If you're a farmer and you usually carry tomatoes or potatoes from one part of your farm to another, this is the time to get on the road and fill your truck with Amazon packages or whatever it is. I mean, markets sort these things out very quickly. We just need to stop having a stereotypical view of shifting things around and thinking it's only to do with containers and it can only go on a ship, and we just do it. I wasn't joking when I was saying about people writing software in their back lots. These things are eminently solvable. We just need to get on with it. We've had a very rigid kind of supply chain up until now. The idea that it goes on a ship, goes on a container, it comes from that port. There are lots and lots of ways to move things around, and we need to do everything we can to mobilize an entire workforce. In my country, many of the truck drivers just retired during COVID. They were getting older. They were fed up of pit stops and then uncomfortable places in the middle of the night and no facilities, and they just said, "Oh, come on, life's too short. I'm not going back." So these things are solvable with better pay, better conditions, sorting out some decent places where these trucks can stop, and being very creative and dynamic. We can't have a situation where we're waiting 18 months for new trucks. It's ridiculous. Very
good. And I think along those lines, I'm guessing in the same vein where we used to take a long time, I think one of your quotes was around the world's going to change faster than you can hold a board meeting. That same thing in the thought of innovation, right? The time that we have to innovate and implement new ideas and processes and all of those things is greatly shortened. Is that correct?
Yeah. And again, how crazy why would you bother to get a product from the Great Lakes? You can get it from another company in New Mexico, right? And then you can go and fetch in your own pickup truck. Why, we have this fixation that somehow we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. And we've always shipped, we've always had the product go 1,000 miles across the United States. Why? 3,000 miles across the United States. Why? Across the Rockies. Why? This is a moment to think agile. And this is what I was trying to say. Internet 4.0, Industry 4.0 doesn't do that. It just optimizes the processes you've already got. It doesn't think out the box. For that, you need human beings, and robots need human beings to be geniuses. That's the thing. There are no robot geniuses in the world when it comes to innovation or cracking through solutions like the ones we're talking about, right?
Absolutely. Well, we have another question here. What threat do you think will replace carbon once we ultimately reach zero?
So what threat will replace carbon?
Yes.
What will replace carbon when we reach carbon zero? Well, I would say I would continue to say what I've said before in my book, The Future of Almost Everything. I listed a whole load of what I call wild card risks. Some people call them swan events. They are low probability but potentially high impact events. Okay, I said at the time that viral pandemic was number one, and that continues to be a major issue for us. Okay, until we find, here's the strange thing that we have not yet found a single drug that is as effective as penicillin was against bacteria in 1944, as effective against a single virus. Okay, So it's like medicine has stood still since 1940s against viruses. That's why we're having to use vaccines, but vaccines are a really terrible solution. We need a different kind of vaccine for every virus. It takes a whole year to make it. It's a mammoth expedition to protect everybody. You don't want to protect everybody. You basically want to treat people when they get sick. That's what happens with bacteria, right? You let people get sick, and if they get really sick and they can't shake it off and they develop a pneumonia, you give them antibiotics. You don't give antibiotics to the whole population. You don't vaccinate the whole population against a bacterial pneumonia. So we have a huge amount to do to catch up on that one. And I think that's going to take at least another 10 to 15 years. That's the first thing. Secondly, sustainability issues are not going to go away. It's not just a question of the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we could have a great debate about that. It's things like where do we get the global supplies for the next generation of electrical batteries when we've exhausted a lot of the places we used to mine from, places like DR Congo. What do we do about the impact? We've got to carbon zero, but the world's still too hot. And what does that do for agriculture? How are we feeding what will be a population of 11.5 billion people by 2060? That's the year that China's saying it will be carbon zero. It just simply means we're pumping out less carbon. But I mean, what happens to if we're not careful, we on current projections, and I know that you're saying, well, okay, I'm a believer of the science, but if we're right to say about the methane thing, then you would see even if carbon dioxide levels are stable, you're still in a runaway situation. I said that most of the carbon that's underground in the world is methane. It's mostly methane, frozen. So if that starts to thaw, then actually you probably need to be carbon negative, not just in carbon balance.
True.
You know,
Yeah.
really big issues for us, and these are the reasons why people like Greta Thunberg are getting such an emotional response from a generation of 12 to 30-year-olds, because they're the ones who are going to live with it. And no, that's the challenge. Now I realize that some people on the call may think this is a whole load of baloney, that they think it's all overdone, and to which I'd say, look, you may well be right. Even if, as I said before about insuring my house against burning down, even if worse things, if someone says to me, oh, I'm a complete climate skeptic. I said, fine, well, fine. So what do you think the risk is of it being right, this climate science? Well, 3%. So, whoa, that's high. Whoa. I hope you don't believe that. I hope you don't think it's as high as 3%. That's like 1 in 33. So you're saying it's a 1 in 33 risk that your house is going to burn down this year? I hope you've got a good fire sprinkler system in your house. Because actually, if you have a 1 in 33 risk of something happening that's really serious for, let's say, your whole town, you'd do something really big about it, wouldn't you? You build a flood defense, for instance. If someone said there's a 1 in 33, there's going to be a major, major disaster and half the homes are going to be destroyed, you would build a flood wall. So the issue is, even what I find is even the greatest climate skeptics in the world land up in the same place eventually, which is, okay, so we need an insurance policy. That means we have to act. We can debate about the degree and debate about the speed. But it's fascinating that it's not governments that are leading it now. Even Greta Thunberg's not leading it now. It's not the activist movements that are leading it now. It's the finance directors, the climate skeptic finance directors of very large manufacturers are leading this. Why? Because it makes sense for the bottom line. Because their clients demand it anyway for sales. The people right at the top of the tree who are selling the final product have to justify for every single molecule of carbon that's been put into it. And they've already made a decision to be carbon neutral. So whether we like it or not, we're sort of involved in this process. And it's actually, I think, very exciting. And I would say this to anyone on the call: if you're looking for a number one winner, I would say if you can come up with an innovation today that does something that the industry really needs a lot of, and you found a way to do it for 30% less energy, you are going to be a very wealthy person for the rest of your life. Just make sure you patent it.
correctly, yes. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I think there's a couple more questions, but I think we're running a little at time here. So I do greatly appreciate, again, everything that you've brought to us today. Greatly appreciate that, and having you joining us, especially while you're on family vacation. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Well, here we are. It has been a fabulous manufacturing month here in New Mexico. We've had manufacturers open their doors and take us on tours. We've had demonstrations for school-age children, and let's see, what else have we done? We've had a great week this week learning about the exciting opportunities that lay ahead for manufacturing right here in New Mexico. As we come to a close, I would really like to express and give gratitude to those that helped make all of this possible. They have an unending dedication to the manufacturers in our state, and I can't thank them enough. First, thank you to New Mexico MEP's team that works endlessly and tirelessly to serve our manufacturers every day. We have Jeff Abrams, Denise Williams-Monahan, Scott Bryant, and Wesley Eccles working directly with our manufacturers. We have John Rogers and Amanda Garcia working with our partners at the NMSBA program in Los Alamos. We have Claudia Infante, Linda Gruber, and Tammy McCarty supporting us in the office. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to our event team, starting with our event manager, Dominique Foley-Wilson, our marketing specialists, Holly Bradshaw-Eakes and her team at the Holly Company, and Kristen Carlson and her team at Think All Day Marketing, as well as our fabulous production crew that made this go off without a hitch. We have Reinhard Lorenz with First Eye Films and Jonathan Hollinger with Techtronics. They have been wonderful to work with. If you ever have any production needs, this is definitely who you should turn to. And of course, thank you to you, our attendees. Like I said, as we're closing here, we are already looking forward though to our planning for the 2022 Manufacturing Month. So again, please like and subscribe. If you haven't done that yet, like and subscribe. You can also head over to our website to keep up to date with planning for next year's events, as well as sign up for our newsletters. That'll help you keep up to date with what's going on with festivities around New Mexico MEP. And we hope that this has been as good of a journey for you as it has for us. I know our team has learned a lot of things, and we will take that information back and hopefully wrap it into the services that we have available for our manufacturers throughout the state, as well as our partners. I thank everyone again. Have a great, fabulous weekend.